All right, we are live. Thanks everybody for joining us today and spending some time with us. So I am going to share my desktop out and pull up my presentation. Before I pull up my presentation, I'll just do a quick commercial because I make a lot on this free service, so I always like to pitch it. But this is something that I started doing for some institutions. It's called the Market Update. I rolled that out today. I just want to make sure that you guys were aware of that service. It's at strategicmarketupdate.com. I put a link in there where you can sign up if you haven't signed up. I've got people that are teaching this inside of real estate classes, offices once a month, things like that. But I go through and I take you through an overview of what's going on in the market. I try to summarize it in one slide of what I think are the key takeaways for the market, and I go through where are we now and all the key things that I'm focused on. And my particular approach and model as it relates to housing and lending has to do with housing prices, employment, personal savings rates, deleveraging. There are 3 or 4 key areas that I think are critical to how the housing recovery responds. We have to continue to see job growth. We need to see savings rates start to increase a little bit. Part of that headwind is more and more people are paying down debt. We saw a huge decrease in debt again this past month on a year-over-year basis because people are deleveraging and or they're getting principal write-downs. We've got low inventory, which is very positive for housing. We've got some month-over-month rising valuations, albeit tiny, but they're still going up. Sometimes a big win is neutral. And that's where I think we are right now with housing. Instead of it being a big headwind, we're actually moving to a place where it's simply it sucks less. And it sucks less to the point that it's becoming somewhat neutral. And that can be a very, very positive thing overall for the market as we look at it today. But anyway, you can get that free report, sign up for it, and you get these charts and some narration and overview of some of the things I'm looking at and some things that I think are relevant to people that are in this type of an audience. So I did want to let you know that that's out there. That said, let me jump into our webinar, and I'll introduce in a second our guest today, Todd Swanson. As always, my 60 to 90 second infomercial. This is about where mindset meets skill set. For those of you who are on the call for the first time, we talk a little bit about our software, and we use that contextually, but the real focus here is all about how do you become a better user of the software and or other tools, because at the end of the day, I can give you a hammer or a saw, and what you do with it will be very different from one contractor to the next based on your experience, your talent, your history, and we have these different people on these calls, so they have a chance to share with you their background, their experience, and show you different ways that they're using the tool in their practice. We had a nice mention today by Rob Chrisman. I don't know if you're familiar, many of you, golly, I got my leaf blower outside the office here. Perfect timing. I told you, so if it's not technology, it'll be some other kind of okay, he's walking away. So Rob Chrisman was nice enough to mention us in his blog today. If you guys don't get the daily Chrisman report, it's really a phenomenal daily report. If you don't know how to get that, email us at support@kendalltodd.com, and we'll forward you over to Rob so you can get on his daily blog. He tells you about what's going on in the mortgage industry and what's happening out there. The tool itself, as we've mentioned again and again, is really all about how do you take all of this money, time, and energy you've invested in licensing and marketing and tools and systems and events and take advantage of that lead in such a way that when that lead comes in, you maximize your conversion rate. This is the critical part right here. This is what happens. This is where the sale is made. This is where, in my mind, all of your experience comes together. You provide value. You don't get paid for the 1003. You don't get paid for that process and closing. It's a part of how you get paid, but that's not what people are paying you for. It's just an assumption. I don't pay my doctor for the blood work, even though it's important. I need his interpretation. I need his advice. I need his feedback. That's what I'm really spending those dollars for, and that's true with your clients. We've had a chance to review this model with many different people and different levels, from individual LOs to presidents and CEOs of large corporations, and it's really being adopted by a number of groups who love the idea of having a centralized approach to meeting with clients and, again, increasing their conversion rates. Our model, based on a lot of research and stuff we've done that we won't go into, is, do I have the cash can I afford this right now? Do I have the cash flow? And what's the financial impact over time? And you can do this in a very simple way with this tool. If you haven't figured out how to do that yet, you will, I guarantee you. Okay, so do I have the cash? Can I afford this right now? Do I have the cash flow? Does this make sense? When we do our 2 case studies today, or any other case study, we always look at it in that standpoint. If the client is not, if they don't care about the cash or the cash flow, you don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But most people want to have those things addressed. It's got to be fast, easy, and accurate. It needs to deliver clarity and confidence, and it needs to lead to quick action. With the maybes kill us in any business. We want to be able to move quickly through a series of options for people, deliver clarity and confidence so they can say, wow, this is something I ought to do, or it just doesn't make sense right now. And I've had a number of loan officers say, I'm realizing that I'm going through situations with clients where I'm doing 3 to 5 minutes of planning to see that they're going to save $8,000 over 30 years. And I just can't find a real reason for them to do it, and I don't spend any more time on it. I might have traditionally gone into a 1003, collected the documents, gone through a lot of work, and then along the way the client does a calculation or just says, this really isn't worth it to me, and they're not sure either. So we want to, again, help you move that client to quick action, which is a win-win for both you and the client. We're continuing to make a lot of progress on our projects. When we do one of our cases today, I'll show you the progress we're making on the web reports. I mentioned our YouTube site last time, but I didn't have the full address, and I got a couple emails asking, where is that? You just go to youtube.com and put in Todd Ballinger YouTube. I think we have 180-something videos there now. I know you guys are busy. You don't have a lot of time necessarily just to sit. But if you were going to do one thing, I would tell you to go through this series, which are listed under the BSA webinars, and go through and catch any that you missed, because there's usually gold in every one of these videos that we have speakers that share something that they may have spent 5 or 10 years learning in their practice, and that's pretty cool. With the HTML reports, we've got more features of that rolled out. We're working on the design interface right now, so it looks pretty. We're still waiting on that code from our video integrator. They have delayed, again, getting us the video integration code. So we may roll out the HTML dynamic reports and just wait to add the video button when that's ready. We're working on the mobile report syncs, the commercial portion, and we continue to move forward on our LOS hot syncing project. That said, let me jump right into our special guest today is Todd Swanson. Todd, you are in California, is that right?
Yeah, I'm in the San Diego area.
You're in the San Diego area. Cool. Well, thanks for being with us today. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, I looked in the system and I saw you had about 148 active plans, and between you and Dan, you guys have close to 300 plans in the system. And do you consider yourself working with Dan as a partner, or do you consider yourselves kind of working independently and then you just share ideas? How would you kind of explain your dynamic there?
We don't share our production or commissions, but everything else is a partnership. So, as an example, he got me on this. I was using another software that I was frustrated with. I love that you guys do these continual upgrades, and you're open to the feedback when there's a calculation that maybe doesn't seem right, or and often it's been me that didn't put the data in right. So that's been huge. And I've loved working with the BSA. Dan and I have shared everything from our software to our assistants. We've pursued a business model with virtual staff. So our processors all work from home, our coordinators work from home, and troubleshooting that and implementing those ideas has been the real power of having that relationship. Many of the ideas that either of us have come up with are sort of stillbirthed, if you will, if we're doing them on our own. But when we've got the other person there to help us get it to the finish, it's about that implementation. So often with implementation, as you've probably seen, we tend to stop right at the goal line and not quite get it completed. And so having a partner has been both the accountability as well as helping me troubleshoot an idea to get it finished.
So that's cool. So you don't share money, which is the death of most partnerships is you start sharing
Right.
money. But you do a good job there. You share strategy. You kind of play off each other with tools and teamwork and ideas. It sounds
Mhm.
like, and that
Mhm.
creates an accountability, which is a really neat idea. We always tell people have an accountability partner that will you'll do stuff for other people that you want to do for yourself, and an accountability partner can be that person that just simply says, did you get that done? Did you get it done in time? So I encourage you to have that kind of an outside, voice in your life. How many years have you been in the business, Todd?
I got in right at the end of 2002.
2002. So about 10 years.
Hmm.
Cool. And you consider yourself a mortgage broker or banker, or what's your format?
I'm a mortgage broker.
Okay.
I work with. I was in Joe Stump's buy referral only coaching program for a number of years, and so my business strategy has really been the after unit and then the during unit. And the way he defines those is an after unit is your past clients, your relationships, your family, friends, and focusing on staying in touch with them, trying to add value. And so when an opportunity arises, either I'm reaching out to them saying, hey, rates have dropped, or they're contacting me because I've positioned myself in their mind as their mortgage advisor, and because of the existing relationship, I've earned their trust. And I don't do any before unit. I don't do he defines a before unit as, let's say, mailing postcards to an apartment complex or something where you're trying to get strangers to engage with you. I've actually moved to where I'm boldly saying that I don't do business with strangers. I'm not open to the general public. And
Oh,
the
that's neat. So
closest I
you
come to
create
that,
you create a
that's what,
scarcity doing that.
yeah, it gives me a real good hard line. And I found that when I'm meeting with a client and explaining that, the closest I come to a stranger is when it's somebody referred by a realtor, and maybe the realtor met him in an open house or something like that. But even then, I can point out, I've got a relationship with the realtor who you've chosen to work with. So I've got a higher level of care that I've got to provide you than if you were dealing with a stranger. If I don't get the job done, I'm going to hear it from your realtor. And so, I need to make sure that not only you as my client are happy with the service I provide, but so is the, whatever the relationship, your buddy, your coworker, whatever it is, that they're also happy with it because they took a risk introducing you to me.
Cool. So there's a difference between saying I'm by referral only and actually living a by referral
Mhm.
only model and taking everybody that walks in the door. So what percentage of your business is coming in as purchase versus refinance right now?
Last year it was about 60-40, but this year I'm really skewed to refis just because rates are so low. And so I think I'm probably 20-80 right now, purchase versus refi.
So about 20 purchase and 80 refi. And what's your primary source of business today, Todd? Is it coming in from realtors, existing clients, financial advisors? Where are those referrals coming from?
The largest portion is my after unit. It's my past client database, going back
Okay.
and looking at. We use Salesforce as a CRM,
Uh-huh.
and so we've got a lot of data on their past loan, and so it's really easy to go in there and put stuff into BSA and show them that over time, hey, I can do a free refinance. We'll knock a quarter off, we'll knock a half off your rate, whatever that is, and project it out over the remaining life of your current loan. This is how much money you'll save.
That's great. Yeah, we had Jeff Younger on last week, and he was getting over a 60% a conversion rate where he went into his database, did a quick Jing video showing a BSA plan and how much they would save refinancing. And he was just sending them the video, and he said about 2/3 of the time his response was, "Yeah, let's do this." I mean, that the sale was basically made because it was a warm client relationship, and he had some CRM data that could say this is a good person. And some people use their LOS or whatever is easiest to get that data. There's not a lot of data to bring over to create a plan, is there? You really just need to know a name, an email address, and maybe a product and an interest rate from their prior closing.
Right, what their current payment is, what their current interest rate is. You can backward. Go ahead.
No, so yeah, just all the liability details, and you have that from your CRM. Is that something you move over from the LOS into the CRM?
Yeah, we have our assistant key in the data after the loan application is taken. When that's typed up by our coordinator, our virtual assistant Donna is notified to key that into Salesforce. We use Mortgage Planner CRM, which is built on the customized Salesforce for the mortgage business.
Okay, cool. So you're using the Mortgage Planner version of that. Cool.
Right. And then at the end of the transaction, when it's closed, Donna gets another automated email that tells her to go back and look at the point file. Because, as you know, sometimes you start out at a different interest rate or the loan amount changes right at the end, that sort of thing. And so she reviews that data again in the transaction record in Salesforce. And so that's, I go back to that when I'm doing these BSAs. And I love the BSA for that, because it's so often clients have that objection that, $50 or $100 a month, it's just not worth the trouble. I'm too busy right now. But when we can project it out over time to, what their problems are, what their desires are in life, and linking long term with, this is how I'm going to help you meet your goals, that $50 really does matter, because it means funding your child's college education, or it means being mortgage free 3 years earlier than you were planning to. Whatever I already know about them, I can insert that, and I use Jing Video as well. So I'll do the BSA and do a 2 or 3 minute video walking them through the highlights of, hey, it's free, and you're going to save this much money, and I projected it out over 10 years or 20 years, whatever time frame, and this is how much money you're going to save. So it's, that $50 a month really is substantial, tens of thousands of dollars.
We talked. I'm sorry. We talked about this in a prior interview we did with somebody, but it's just psychologically people are motivated more by fear of loss than desire for gain. And it's a strange thing, but if you position to someone, say, winning a quarter versus losing a quarter they already have, they will take action more. 2 out of 3 times they'll take action to avoid a loss of a quarter that they feel like is theirs, than to gain a quarter that they don't believe is theirs, when in reality, the net to them is the same. So when you're having a conversation with a client and you're positioning something, if you position it as, not taking action will cause you to lose $55,000 over the next 7 years, it's the same thing in a way of saying, if you do this, you're going to save $55,000 over the next 7 years. I can tell you that just based on the studies and the psychology of that dynamic, you're actually having a reduction in your conversion rate by how you position and frame. So think in terms of, we'll do that with the case studies that we do later, but saying, hey, this is what's happening now. That's what that current column is for. And then we'll say, this is what you would lose over the next 7 years if you don't take advantage of the 30-year at this rate. This is what you'd lose over the next 7 years if you didn't take advantage of the 15. Because people will simply act to preserve and to avoid loss for some reason. I guess you could say it makes sense, but I've never fully understood it. But I think there's something about it. I have something and I'm losing it that has a different impact than I might gain something. Maybe it's just in their mind they feel like one's a sure thing I'm going to lose versus, I've always had things that I thought I was going to gain on and I didn't. So this might be the same. So just something to keep in mind with for all of you when you're thinking about how you frame and position the same information with a client. You mentioned before, we don't normally name names, but you mentioned before you were using another platform. What were you using before?
Mortgage Coach.
Mortgage Coach. What people ask about the difference when you think about the difference. You used it. How many years did you use that platform?
Gosh, probably 3 years or so, and I think I've been on BSA 2-3 years now. So
3 years.
I know. Mm-hmm.
What's the difference? I mean, when you look at the difference in the two, since you spent 3 years on one, a couple years now on this platform and stuff, if someone was out there and they were asking, what's the difference in your mind? How do you see them as different?
Well, BSA is continuing to evolve and add value, and I think it's an easier, more straightforward software. The Mortgage Coach for a long time wasn't on the web, and so now they are, and so is BSA. But that was also one of the things for me, was to try to move everything to the cloud and get off of my hard drive, off the PC. So I like that. I like the flexibility with the reports. And I found with Mortgage Coach back when I was using it that you really kind of had to torture the data a little bit to get, if I wanted to show something, there's a lot more flexibility in the way you set up BSA that I can show and not show things with the plus and minus symbols there. If I don't want to show the tax benefits, or I do, for example. If I don't want to show it over time, I just want to show, here's right now, the two differences, your current loan versus new loan. You've got that ability to really customize what I present to the client, because if I know the client has an area that they just don't understand, or they're going to get wrapped around the axle on, I can choose not to show that, because that's really our job. And if it's in the best interest of the client to move forward with this, we need to help them understand why it's in their best interest, and not have them get caught up in too much data and over-analysis, that analysis, paralysis of analysis.
Yeah, I've had people say, well, what's the difference between a $10 million producer and a $20 million producer? And I'm like, at a certain point, once you have the tactical basics of the business, the artistry, as I like to think of it, is what is it, what is a good artist and a bad artist? It's the same in the lending industry. At some point, you get some basic skills down. And one of those skills is understanding when a client is full, or what a specific client needs to be able to make a decision that's good for them and move forward. And that means if every presentation you do is completely the same, you're probably not reading that client or really asking the questions that you need to ask to know what it is that's important to them. What's the one thing that, if I can do that for you, you'd feel pretty good about moving forward in a transaction? Don't be afraid of questions like that, because they tell you what a client is going to need to see to feel comfortable moving forward. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I get that question a lot, and I'm always like, well, coming from me, I've used both platforms, and I would say they're both good platforms. They're just different in terms of the approach that we're taking to do business, and we're glad to have you over here using BSA. I know you've got a case study you're going to share with us, and maybe a story or two about how you're using BSA now in your practice to differentiate. Any last sort of tips or things you'd say that in the last year or two, I know your practice has really exploded. I remember you and Dan both had some of you, I think last time I talked to you, you were having your best months ever, and I assume you're continuing to have your best months ever.
Yeah, I'm up 30 as of the end of June. I haven't looked at where I'm at for July, but as of the end of June, I was up 33% over where I was last year. So I'm having a great year, and I know Dan is as well, which is a lot of fun. And because we're pursuing, I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Work Week, and out of that, we got that concept of automate, delegate, or delete. And so the CRM is the big chance to automate so much of what we do, and we went into it thinking this is the opportunity to automate our outward bound communications, such as checking a box that says the appraisal's back, and having both realtors, both transaction coordinators, and the client be informed via an email that the appraisal is back, and have it written, tailored for a buyer's agent, tailored for a listing agent, tailored for the client. The feedback we got from that is they think I typed that myself, when it's really a template that's populating with their information. But we found more powerful than that was the opportunity to remind our staff of this is how we do things here. And so at given points in the transaction, we have emails going to our processors, to our coordinator, as well as to my assistant Donna, a virtual administrative assistant, that tells them to do stuff, reminds them of deadlines. As an example, yesterday we wrote an email that's going to go out when the credit report is 60 days old, and remind the processor, check with this lender. Since we're a broker, each wholesale institution has a slightly different policy on when they pull a new credit report. And so this email is going to go out and tell the processor, hey, we're at 60 days now on that credit report. When does this lender think it's too old? When do we need to pull another one? Because I've had one right at funding that kind of screwed things up. So I want to get ahead of that stuff, and the CRM really, really allows you to do that. It's a great tool.
So it sounds like a lot of your practice now is centered around communicating to the client the value of your advice, communicating throughout the process itself. And we've heard that a lot from some of the institutions that we've talked to about how they're trying to increase their level of communication across all platforms. One of the questions that came in from Steve online is, have you ever charged for BSA, or is BSA a service that you're just providing to these referrals as part of what you do? And maybe you could talk about your process. How do you incorporate the BSA process? Is it a first strike with most prospects? Do you collect information generically and then create a plan? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, before I do, I just want to add it, as far as the communication, it's about relationships. Any relationship, whether it's your spouse or your client, you don't have a relationship unless you communicate. And so to be able to get referrals, we have to be letting them know what's going on, having them be informed, having them be comfortable because they're hearing from us.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer the BSA, as an example, the case I was going to use today, I used with first-time buyers every time. I use the rent versus own. It's such a powerful tool to help them see the fact that the mortgage is a financial instrument. It's not just a loan like an auto loan or a credit card or what they think. It's a financial tool that used right can help us manage our cash flow, can help us have more for retirement, pay less in taxes, and manage our financial stress, reduce that, and even help us fund our children's college education. So the rent versus own allows us to show that and allows us to incorporate the decision over time as well as the tax benefits, which, if they're using an online calculator, and most clients, in their first consultation have already done that, it's wrong because it doesn't incorporate the tax benefits. And so I find that's one of the biggest trust builders that people sit back and go, wow, I've met with another loan officer or 3 other loan officers, and none of them gave me this information. They didn't take this time. And ultimately what they're implying is, I care more about them than the people they met with. The people they met with were used car salesmen versus, it's a taxi versus a limo. And that I'm trying to give them a first-class experience, and it's not about just the transaction, which it is for, often the retail guys. That's the way they come across, because they're not explaining stuff.
That's very cool. So using that sort of an advisor-based approach, and I assume you don't charge clients for this. This is just part of what you do to differentiate yourself overall. Is that right?
Correct.
Cool. Well, let me do this. I'm going to let you take control here. Let's see. I should be able to click on you in the menu here, and it'll pop up there. And just all you have to do is click share your desktop.
Okay.
Cool. All right, it's working.
Okay, that would be my little family. My daughter had a father-daughter dance at her kindergarten this year, which was just one of life's great events.
I see, and you're getting her drinking wine early, which is good for kids.
Absolutely, Italian restaurant. What are you going to do?
All right. Well, yeah. Well, show us how you kind of got things set up, and maybe take us through a case study and talk about how you present the information.
Absolutely. So this is the case that I mentioned to you, the rent versus own. So this client, John Mitchell, his background, he's divorced. He's got 2 special needs children that he has custody of. And he's trying to, he'll be running his first Ironman in New York here in about a week or 2. So a lot of time spent on the road training, a lot of time spent with his kids and their special needs. And so he's the kind of client that, opened up. I like to have a conversation where I go deep. Joe Stump's taught us what's important to you about, and you try and go 7 levels deep. What's important about buying a home? Whatever their answer is, feed that back. Well, what's important about not throwing money away on rent? And usually around the 4th or 5th time you fed that question back, I find that they start to get out of the logical and they get into the emotional. And so, John's thing is he doesn't want to be renting. He's had to move a couple times in the last 2 years, and when you've got autistic children, that's rough on them. They thrive in a set environment, and when you keep changing the environment, they tend to, go backwards a little bit. And so he really wanted to have a home that would give them that stability. So he wanted to make sure he did it right. He, as a result of the divorce, his assets are much lower than where he wants them to be at this stage of his life, and so he's maxing out his 401k. And so when you got that combination of maxing out the 401k and the special needs kids, there's not much room for error in his budget. And so the rent versus own, what we got into for him was really calculating the tax benefits. And in California, we have a state income tax. So, the state and the federal combined benefits, when I estimated it, my original amount, if you see here, this is after I had a meet with my tax advisor, which I'll show in a second. I was originally around 540 with my estimate of where his monthly tax benefit would be. So I was really close. And the funny thing about this was he took my estimate, he went to his human resources department, and that person said, well, you're going to end up with $30 less take home per month. And so what I found in this was, number one, I introduced him to a tax advisor that takes this sheet. Everybody's probably familiar with this in the federal tax return. You have that summary sheet. He takes last year's summary sheet for the client, so he knows what their exemptions are, their deductions, et cetera. And then he adds in, you're going to pay all this mortgage interest, you're going to pay these property taxes. And so, right here's the magic line. It's this amount overpaid. And so he calculated for him that buying a home on the federal will save him $4,700 a year. And then he's got the state summary, and the state would save him another $1,252 a year. And that comes out to $497 a year. So I adjusted this as 29% is 508. So that made a big difference, because he was ready to cancel the transaction after he talked to his HR person. And I found when there's that much of a disparity, it's important to find out what the definition is that everybody's using. In politics, a lot of times they talk about the rich, but that can mean people with lots of assets, or, as it's being bandied around now, apparently somebody who's rich makes $250,000 a year, regardless of their house. Mm-hmm. So knowing what the definition of that's being used is important. And in this case, the HR person had been previously told by John 3 years ago to withhold extra money on the taxes. So the HR person left that extra withholding in his calculation. And John had him calculate a 401k loan, whereas he had been talking with me about doing a 401k withdrawal. Mm-hmm. So different definitions, different outcomes. When I got Brian Kane, my tax advisor, into the conversation, and having done this, he was able to go back to his HR person, and the HR person said, oh, well, yeah, that's correct. You're going to have $500 more a month. And so, we've been able to move forward with the transaction. This is very recent. This conversation was about 2 weeks. We still haven't closed this long. We're in the middle of it.
Have you looked at, we used to tell people, like in that example, if you go back to the screen of $500 a month, we would say, look, you could actually increase your withholdings to have an additional $500 a month in take home, and then you're getting the actual pay raise. You're giving yourself a pay raise in real time to help with the cash flow differential, and then at the end of the year, you won't get that deduction because you will have taken out more, you'll have paid less taxes in, but the deduction would offset that. Did you guys actually have him adjust his deductions, or just maybe clarify for him that that's what it's going to look like at the end of the year in savings?
Yeah, the power of linking up with the tax advisor is that he calculated the exact number of exemptions that John should change his W-4 to when he goes to the HR office. So that's huge. He charges $150 for that service to review the tax return, to do a phone consultation with the client, and to prepare that summary. And he also did one that was 5 months remaining of this year, so John could see, over the remaining year what he changed the exemptions to, how much the take home is going to be. And then this was a full 12-month savings. And so
that's very cool. And I wanted to point that out because I wasn't sure if people were tracking with you, that if you know what that is, you would go to your withholding department and say, I have 4, right now I'm withholding 4, I want to withhold 9, and that would give me an extra 508 a month or 500 a month. You just get close to it. Now you've effectively given that client that money as real world cash flow savings. So his after-tax payment before was $1,800. His after-tax now is going to be $1,864, but he's not going to feel that right away. He's going to be paying $2,372. You can bridge that gap by saying, you're going to pay $2,372, but we're going to show you how to get an extra $500 a month on your paycheck, so that basically there's a wash there. Mm-hmm. That's very cool. Now, as you're going through the story, just show people at the beginning. You showed him his financial cash flow impact, and that is at closing. What are you going to have to bring to the closing table? and I think if I remember correctly, that was like around 18 grand or so.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to say yes to that. If he says I can't do that, then you've got to work on that before you focus on cash flow and wealth impact. But I would assume in that conversation that was something he could live with.
It was, and I reiterated whenever I go over that section, especially if they have not got an offer accepted, that there's three ways to handle this. Other than the down payment, they've got to have their own down payment, but the seller can give a credit for closing costs, and their realtor is going to advise them on whether they think they can get that or not. Some neighborhoods in San Diego, there's just almost no inventory. Others, there's more inventory, and you can ask for a seller credit. And then the second way to handle it, obviously, is the interest rate. With rates as low as they are, instead of going with, say, 3.25 on an FHA loan, maybe we go 3.5, and we get that extra yield spread to the client and get the closing costs paid that way. And I often show them, I use Loan Sifter, and so I'll show them their search based on their FICO score, the loan product they're doing, et cetera. Because, again, going back to, I don't do business with strangers. I only do business with people I have a relationship with. And one of the critical elements of that, and of setting myself up to be the guy they trust and the guy that they want to introduce people they care about, is that I pull back the curtain. There's everything is transparent, And so showing Loan Sifter, maybe I should pull it up real quick, allows me to show them exactly what the rates are, exactly what we get paid. And, I point out that as a broker, we have to show everything, whereas a banker doesn't show their service release premium. And so it's, in some ways, I play on the fact that it's more honest. It's certainly more transparent because you know exactly what our company is making. And so I'm running a search here. I'll show you how that works. And so it's very easy then by using this tool to explain if we go up or down in the rate, the effect of that on their closing costs.
So you can pay some of that cost for them. That's great.
Exactly. So like in this one, the top search ever bank, they're paying, $46.48 to this particular client. And obviously that covers her closing costs are running about $3,600 for her SNP. So she's going to have $1,000 over the closing costs. It's not only going to be free, but she may almost skip an entire mortgage payment because the interest is going to be paid. Or a big substantial portion of it, $1,000 worth, is going to be paid by the lender.
That's very cool. And then how would you use the wealth impact in this conversation? You go through and kind of get the closing costs nailed. You showed basically a way to wash out those savings on the monthly. And then would you touch on, and one thing I want to show you on the cash flow, if you go up for 1 second, this was something that two people in the last two calls had pointed out that I thought was something I would overlook in some cases, is that when you show that payment difference is $64, is essentially a wash, highlighting above the difference in the principal payment for this client and saying, but by the way, it's really not $1,864. Look at the principal payment that you're making to your landlord versus the amount you're paying to yourself each month. You're paying $548 a month to yourself in the form of principal. So that $1,864 that we've come up with is a wash. You're actually, in addition to the 508 savings we're getting you through the payroll adjustment, you're really making something much closer than to a $1,300 monthly payment.
And
on an apples to apples basis.
Absolutely, and that's the power of this section down here, is that because it projects it out over time, there's a tendency to overestimate our risks and underestimate our benefits or the opportunities. And so they see 548 and they go, it's 548, but projected over, just 10 years, which is when his kids will be, adults and hopefully out of the house, it's virtually no appreciation. I'm going to take that back to zero. It's a $67,000 mistake if he doesn't buy a home.
Mm-hmm.
And so, long-term property appreciation rates, since World War II have been 4%. If I add that in, then it's, now we're talking 241,000. And I like to do both when I'm doing it live with them because I can say, look, regardless of what happens with the market, even though I know the long-term trend is 4%, and eventually we'll come back to that because that's how trends work, even without it, it's a $67,000 mistake not to buy a home.
That's cool. That's very cool. I like it. And then how do you present this to the client? Do you find that you're doing a lot of these live and you're kind of going through this, or are you doing this and then presenting it more as a report?
When I'm doing the rent versus own, I do it live because I want to go through and get that interaction with them, and it's part of my initial consultation that I have that. I explain how I work, that I don't work, with the general public, and then I go into the what's important about buying a home. And then from there, I really drill down to, I found one of the other motivators for people, especially when it's the first home, is that they're trying to live out something that either they experienced growing up, or, that they want to repeat for themselves, for their children, or that they want to avoid for themselves and their children. Mm-hmm. And so kind of talking about, okay, when you envision the house that you're going to buy, what is it you're looking for? And so after that, it's getting into this and going over, show them Loan Sifter. I'll actually show them Mortgage Market Guide as well, just to show them the bond market and that this is what determines rates. If anybody's talking about the 10-year Treasury, they don't know what they're talking about. And then I jump into the Borrow Smart here so that I can go and I'll ask them, based on, your current take-home, what would be the most you would feel comfortable spending on rent? I'll work in the tax benefits and the cost of the home ownership and work that backward into a maximum purchase price for you. And that's your red line. Do not cross. You can buy less than that, and I want you to understand I'm not pressuring you to go to this price. I want to help you find the ceiling.
That's very cool, man. Well, one thing that's very obvious just as you go through this, how much you know about your clients and how much you care and the way that you're approaching this, which I really applaud you. This industry is moving much towards a financial advice sort of a centric focus, and it's really all about the advice and the relationship that you build. That's where you're going to create a phenomenal compounding annuity of new referrals and future opportunities, because each client is a gateway transaction to new relationships, new opportunities, especially if you do a good job and do what's right for them and take good care of them. So I always pick up new things as I'm watching this, and I really like the approach, and definitely appreciate you sharing some of this with the group. If you can hang out for a little bit, you can hop off if you want. I'm going to go through a case study or two and see if I can tie some of the stuff that you've shared with us back into the conversation today.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's see. So I'm going to hit the stop button, close everybody out on his share, and pick back up on my own. And hopefully everyone is seeing the screen here. Angie, just give me a yes in there if you see my screen. And I'll talk about two quick examples here. Let's see. Good. Okay, thanks. All right, so I'm going to do a high net worth refinance if that case made over and a cash flow needed. And I'll just show you a different way to sort of tell a story or solve for a particular problem or need. So let me click this first one here, cash flow needed. And it's a very simple setup. Let me make this just a little bit, let me zoom it up to 100%. There we go. So on this particular client, they had 85,000 in gross income, down from about 125 because one of the spouses had lost their job. And they wanted to know if they could qualify to refinance. And you'll see this, especially coming in sometimes from advisors, where a client, had a certain approach, right? And then the market or life hit them. And now they have a different sort of a current need. In this case, this client needed more cash flow. And so they wanted to know, if one of us lost our job, could we still qualify to refinance? And what we'd like to look at is a 30-year fixed. All right. So not that they've got a mortgage, and the only other debt they had right now was an auto loan with GMAC 21.8 at $485 a month. So I just want to show you the case because this can be something that comes up for you. And what the loan officer was asking about is should I present this with just the 15 or 15 to 30? And I said, look, I would do this simply as a 30-year fixed, first consolidating the existing 30, leaving the auto in place to show them the financial benefit there. And then secondly, do a 30-year with the auto paid off. That way they get a chance to see the cash flow impact, because we have good LTV here. We're only at 64%, and we got great ratios, 12 and 18. So while they're feeling the pinch of having that 40,000 plus a year in income not coming in, they're still fine from a ratio and an LTV standpoint. One of their biggest concerns for doing this is that they wanted the current cash flow, but they were concerned that going from a 15 to a 30 was going to cost them a great deal financially. And it actually would over, say, a 30-year period. But the question was, how long do you think you need to do this? And the client said, look, I just need the cash flow and know I've got cash flow for a couple of years till we can get a new job, and get things back on track. So the same approach would be first the closing cost impact. We estimate about $2,500 was the closing cost for this. So what we did is we bumped the loan amount for both. So we bumped the loan amount to $175,000. That was enough to cover the current mortgage and give them cash out for the closing costs. With this one, we bumped it to cover the auto as well, so that auto would get paid off at closing. So either way, the first question, do they have the cash to do this now? Sure, you got positive $1,100 to positive to $1,300. That doesn't answer the cash flow or the wealth question, but we're chunking it into these important bites. Can you handle the cash at closing? Yes, you're going to walk away with money at closing. Okay, that part sounds good. Now talk to me about cash flow. So if you go with just a 15 to a 30, the benefit here, and actually this needs to be updated because the 30 is probably what, 3.625 right now? Let me go through and put that in 3.625, so I'll just change the rates real quick. So we went down to the actual cash flow. On the 30-year fix, because we're going from a 15 at 4.875, they'd taken out about 2 years ago, to a 30 at 3.65, there was a 767 positive cash flow if they consolidated the auto and paid it off. Because think about it, their need is cash flow. All right, right now I could take 20,000 out and I could give them the 20,000 cash. So I could position this as, if it's just cash flow, then we could pay off the auto. But here's another thing to think about. What if I went in and said, duplicate this, right? And so I just brought everything down. One click, I brought it all down. And the only thing I would change is pay off the auto. No, leave it to no. Now look what I just created, another scenario where what? They have 23,000 now cash at closing. So see how quick that was? We'll call this 30-year cash out. So now with one click, literally 2 clicks, I've given them a whole new scenario. I've got 30-year fixed, 30-year debt consolidation, 30-year cash out, and I'm leaving that auto. So here I've got 767 with basically about flat at closing. Here I have 1152 a month flat at closing. Here I have 667 a month, but I have $23,000 coming to the client at closing. Could they pay off the auto with that? Absolutely. Could they pay off the auto in 6 months? Sure. Could they pay it off in a year? Sure. It's all about what flexibility does this client want in this particular situation. And then lastly, we go down to the financial impact, because their concern was, this is going to cost us a lot of money. And I'm like, well, that's true. If you go out over 30 years and you go from a 15 to a 30, even at a lower rate, what kind of a real financial impact does it have? And it was surprising, because if they took the cash out, there was a negative impact. But if they were just going to basically go from a 15 at 4.875 to a 30 at 3.625, and they took the available cash flow and reinvested it into the home, they were actually better off in both of these situations. Notice they have 118 months to go on that 15. If they refinance and apply the extra payment towards the mortgage, they'd be debt-free in 112. Or if they kept the $23,100 and just stuck it in a checking account as a reserve fund, and then took the $667 a month and applied it towards their mortgage, they'd still be debt-free in 128 months. So it only added 10 months to their mortgage, and it only cost them $8,000 over 30 years to do that. So that's a pretty cool story, because again, it takes the pressure off, and you're able to get down to the real basics here of what's going to be the best thing for you right now. Would you rather have the cash out a lump sum and have an extra 67? Would you rather have just 1152 a month? Would you rather have 767? You can model that so easily and help the client decide what works best for them. So I thought it was a neat story, because so often we find ourselves talking about accelerating debt, right, or paying things off more quickly, when in reality, what people may need right now is cash flow. What we ended up doing, he said, what would you model? I said, what's his time frame? He said, 3 years. He said, it's probably going to be about 3 years is the worst case for his wife to get a job and get back working. I said, well, what is he going to do after 3 years? They said, well, they want to go back to paying that mortgage off as quickly as they can. I said, that's the beauty of this. You could go with a new 30, right? And if they get a job and they have this available cash flow and they just simply apply that back towards the mortgage, they go from 118 to 112 months. There's no cost because they're going to be paid off even faster. And over just a 3-year period, they're actually better off by 35 or 3,800 in these two scenarios, or 1,000, regardless of what they do. So that gave them that confidence to say, I can take action and it's not a bad thing. I'm not killing myself by doing this. I'll come back to that. So let me show you one other example, and I'm gonna have to do this on the fly, but it came in during the week from a loan officer. Did I change? Yeah, okay, good. No, I didn't. Here, I'm gonna click the right one. Okay, yep. So we got the client information out of here. It was a 15-year mortgage that the client had for $2.353 million at 5.25%, and their monthly payment was $20,620 per month. So the question was, on this particular transaction, what's the best way to set it up? Because the client is looking at a 10-year fixed arm of $2 million, because that was the limit. That was the most he was able to borrow. But he could get him that at 3.5%. So the client was going to have to bring $353,000 to the closing table plus closing costs. So the first part was the actual closing costs. He's going to have to walk to the closing table. If he doesn't do anything, he doesn't have to bring anything to the closing table. That's just cash he gets to sit on. That's his money. If he does this and refinances, he'll have to bring $393,100 to the closing table. That's to pay $40,000 in closing costs and to buy the note down by $353,100. So can the client do this? Yes, he has the cash and the cash flow to do this. So that's not a big deal. Does it make sense? What's the monthly difference? Well, going from a 15-year fixed at 5.25 to a 10-year fixed arm at 3.5 was going to free up $11,639 a month in payment. So that's a lot of money on a monthly basis. So that's a pretty cool extra amount of cash to be able to work with. Now the client was actually paying an extra $10,000 a month on top of the mortgage payment to pay this thing off early. So the question that came in was, okay, what's the best way to show these on an apples to apples basis? So the first thing I recommend is you keep the fixed at 26, 20, 27. That's what he's paying now. And you're going to keep paying that on the new mortgage. Meaning that if I'm paying $20,620 today, I'm going to pay $20,620 tomorrow. That means that $11,639 is extra dollars that can be paid towards the debt. The client was paying an extra 10 grand, so all I need to do is come in here and put in $10,000 extra being paid monthly until the loan is paid off. And I come over here and do the same thing. $10,000 monthly until the loan is paid off. So now what have I done? I'm comparing apples to orange, not apples to apples, not apples to oranges. 20,627 plus 10, 20,620 plus 10. I'm comparing the same thing. What's the difference? This is keeping the old 15 at 5.25. This is going with a new 10 at a lower interest rate. Now we look out over the time period and you can see here that the term that's remaining with the extra payments and stuff was only 94 months for this client. So did this make sense for the client or not? Well, the client could pay off the house in 73 months with the same monthly payment, saving $252,000 over that time period. So again, you can tell what seems like a very short amount of time period. If this was a $100,000 loan, it wouldn't work. The savings would be $2,000 over that time period. But on a larger loan like this is how you could potentially generate for yourself what will be, I'm sure, a very large commission, but also really create a ton of value for the client. And there was no other way that you could model this kind of a scenario as Todd was saying, easily with this kind of flexibility and quickly add additional scenarios if you wanted to. But the question is this worth it for you to save $250,000 over the next 7 years or not? Does that make sense? So those are two kind of quick scenarios that I thought I would throw out there, again, just to think about how you position things and use things in your client presentations. I know we're getting close to our time here. I see there's one question from Jack. If on a refi you can show the current plus 3 options, why can't you show 4 options on a purchase? And the reason being is that we assume that in a purchase scenario, they're doing something today. They're either renting or they're living with their parents, but you're still comparing 4 options. You're just comparing what they're currently doing today to up to 3 different alternative scenarios. Again, we could add 4, 5, 6 scenarios. We've actually looked at what it would take to do that and get the numbers. The problem is we get the numbers smaller, and there are guidelines now. You cannot have numbers for client financial presentations under a certain font size, and you start to get some difficult font sizes when you get to 4 or 5 presentations. We found 4 is about as much as we can do legibly. At 5, you end up going to multiple pages. But my main reason for not doing more than 4 is in the paradox of choice, that most clients should be given no more than 3 alternatives for anything, and I really only use 4 as sort of something as an alternative that you might need to show one additional iteration. And your goal would then be in the conversation to be taking those things away, meaning that you're really adding value by removing these other alternatives and saying, this one doesn't make as much sense if you're in a live conversation. This one doesn't make as much as a sense. And when I'm doing my final presentation, I want to have ideally what you're doing today and something that's the best scenario, or something you're doing today and 1 or 2 alternatives where I'm proposing the one that I think is the best for them. Because now you're using that paradox of choice to say, we've looked at multiple options, there are multiple things available for you, but we believe that this particular solution is going to be the best one for you. And as always, we're always open to the greater need of the whole. But I've had some people say, why can't we have 5 or 6 different scenarios side by side? And I'm like, well, I mean, you could technically do that, but it does create some other challenges with how we like to present the information. So hopefully that's helpful. One of the things we're doing as part of the new presentation format is we're going to have in this series the ability to present like John Thompson, present like Dan Williams, present like Todd Swanson. As we see people presenting in a certain way, we're going to take their best practice presentations and build them so you can click that button and it will actually pick the reports and the pages the way that they present, so that you can learn from guys that are doing 20, 40, 50, 100 million a year and how they're using a BSA again to differentiate themselves. So we like to start on time, stop on time. It's 3 o'clock. Really appreciate Todd for being with us today. Hopefully you picked up a few good ideas in here that you can use to render your competition irrelevant. As always, I'll put this up on the YouTube site later today so you can access it. And I encourage you to look last week's video with Jeff Younger. We put up his script that he created for his outbound Gene email campaign, so you can actually download that from the YouTube site in the notes section and R&D that and create your own nice email format. So thanks everybody for your time. Wish you the best and have a fantastic day.